the five of us are here. Item number 2 is declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest? Okay. I need to declare that I have a personal and prejudicial interest in item number 8. I will be recusing myself for agenda item 8, and Councillor Harman will take over and chair that meeting. I will also say that I did an independent site visit in respect of agenda item number 3, but I think given proximity to the municipal offices, most of us will be familiar with that site anyway. With that, I will move on to agenda item number 3. So because this is a regulatory item, members must be present and have heard the proceedings in their entirety to vote on this item. We will ensure that the applicant's representative, if they have one, present in the meeting. I will ask the licensing officer to introduce the report. Members will get an opportunity to ask the licensing officer questions. The applicant or their representative will also get an opportunity to ask any questions about the report, as will any objectors. The objectors will be given an opportunity to speak, and we ask that speakers try to limit this to no more than 10 minutes. The applicant or their representative will then also be given the opportunity to present their case. After this, after each of those, members may ask either the objector or the applicant questions. There's no cross-examination between the two parties. Members will debate the matter. The applicant will be given a final right of reply. I'll read the resolution that we're voting on, and then we will take the vote. It may be that we adjourn to formulate reasons, but that's really up to the committee as to how we feel on that one. So if that's the case, we'll ask you to just leave while we have those conversations. So I think we are now there, and if I can now ask the licensing officer to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is a new application for a street trade-in consent from Mr. Matthew McGinn to trade on Pitfield Street, and you can see that location under Appendix 1. The times are also in the report that have been applied for, and an image has been part of Appendix 2. The committee can approve the application because members are satisfied the location is suitable, or refuse the application because it does not comply with the provisions of street trade-in policy. During the consultation, there were 3 objections, which can all be seen in Annex 3. As for comments from the licensing team, the committee must determine the application with a view to promoting the authority's adopted policy. And if you look at 5.6, we have had a comment from Environmental Health about a possible trip hazard from the tow bar as well. And that is report, and happy to take any comments.
Members, are there any questions to the licensing officer? Councillor Harman.
Thank you. With regard to the horse box test shown on page 9, that photo, I would agree that I think there's a potential trip hazard with the tow bar. And it does rather block most of the pavement. Would there also be an issue with regard to blind or partially sighted people coming across it as an unexpected obstacle?
Yes, obviously, as you can see by the photo, it is quite low bearing. The comments from Environmental Health, they did not make an objection to it, but they did raise concern over the possibility of it being a trip hazard, and obviously, especially for partially sighted persons as well.
Any other questions? Just for me to check. There doesn't seem to be anything in So, Mr. Gunter, over to you.
Thank you. As you know, Cheltenham Bid represents over 700 businesses in the town centre. A main part of our remit is to share the views of the businesses we represent and act in their best interest. There are 27 businesses who have takeaway coffee or other hot drinks as their main core product within a few minutes walk of the proposed location of the horse box. There are then a further 39 businesses which sell coffee in addition to their core offering. So these are restaurants that will sell coffee after a meal and that sort of thing. If someone may have taken a takeaway coffee before the meal, they may not have one after the meal, so it would take away from their business. Cheltenham Borough Council's policy for management of street traders states that street traders should sustain established shopkeepers in the town. Unfortunately, this application, if approved, would take away business from our businesses. Selling takeaway coffee is a competitive market, as we all know, and is as competitive as it is without adding another competitor to the mix, who will not have to pay business rates, energy bills, and other associated costs with running a property in the town centre. Therefore, this business would have an unfair advantage over our of businesses occupying the properties. Street traders should add to the mix of products and services already on offer in the town centre. And the former occupier of this pitch, which sold flowers, which was actually added to the mix, it actually didn't conflict with any of the businesses in the local area. The only other business that sold flowers would have been Marks and Spencer's, but that would have been an additional purchase rather than a core purchase of people when they went in. We've had bid businesses share their concerns about the impact another competitor could have. The trading environment is very difficult at the moment for hospitality businesses with increased energy bills, the cost of living crisis, so people are not spending as much as they are in hospitality businesses, and increased staffing costs. So thank you for your time and allowing us to voice the opinions and views of the bid businesses in the town centre.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members? I am not seeing any. Okay, so Mr. McGinn, it's obviously now your opportunity to present your side of this, and then the committee may well have some questions for you. So if you press the button, we'll...
Brilliant, thank you. We are not professionals in the commercial space. We're both, I'm employed by the government, my partner is employed by the police. And we have seen an opportunity based on the reported increased footfall in Cheltenham, which I understand by the bid is 33%, and based on some really positive national news and figures that have been reported regarding coffee, take-out coffee over the course of the last few months, of which I have a whole, I won't bore you with all the stats, but I've got a whole deck of numbers in front of me, to invest in a sustainable coffee box. By sustainable, what I mean is it's completely self-sufficient, it's self-powering, it relies on solar power, it doesn't make any noise, and hopefully you've seen the pictures, it looks agreeable to what you would expect to see in Cheltenham Town Centre. We picked the spot because it's on a licensed spot for the council, and we felt that it was a good spot to go for. We were very surprised to find that the bid hasn't objected to the implementation of another coffee shop in town located directly next to where we want to put in an application that I understand went in after ours, which was a great surprise to us the other day. And whilst I can empathise and understand entirely the clientele that the bid has, I think that fair competition is really important. We have a couple of things we intend to do with the horse box. We will be giving 10 pence from every hot drink that we sell to charity, local charities, based on a really conservative range of 50 coffees a day, 50 hot drinks a day. That's £1,875 a year, and that's at the lower end of what I'd expect us to sell to remain profitable. And that doesn't include us buying from local vendors in the area. So our coffee roasters are local to Cheltenham. The people that we are asking to supply our cakes crisps and pastries are all local to Cheltenham. I'd also like to draw the committee's attention to the fact that I don't challenge the perspective of the bid that there are a number of 27 businesses operating as their core model for selling coffee, but I don't think their core model is selling hot drinks to take out, of which independent businesses there are far less than that number, and we're applying to be another one. In addition to our charity donations and the not taking out hot drinks, I wouldn't class us in any way, shape or form a legitimate competitor to the majority of the businesses that the bid represents. You know, to say that we would force Starbucks to make people redundant in Cheltenham, I think is which I appreciate isn't a point you're representing now, is a bit of a stretch. What we're trying to do is support the local economy, be part of the local business community. We're happy to pay whatever levies or fees we need to. We've offered to join the bid. We've been told we're not allowed to, but we can pay a voluntary contribution to the bid, which I'm more than happy to do. And we're also happy to consider discounts for the wider business community in Cheltenham. For me, to summarise, this is an opportunity to put what is ostensibly a really good coffee business on the high streets of Cheltenham. The green coffee machine, I understand, is very rarely in situ now. Certainly I've been down every day this week and haven't seen it. I stood and watched in town earlier on this week some local vendors that the bid represent, and in that time there weren't any takeaway coffees taken out, barring the large chains you'd expect, Pret, Coffee Number One and Starbucks and the like. We want to be a low impact, low fuss stall contributing to the local economy, entirely self-sufficient. And to your point about a trip hazard, we've got images. We've done an event since we put the horse box on the site to take some photos. The gap that we have is past the legal recommended limits. It's in excess. The space that is between is in excess of what the Highways Agency and the Council state as is approved. And also, the point you've made about the towing bar is a really valid point. So what we've done is we've bought an A-frame that sits really nicely over the towing bar, that my wife has pictures of, should anybody want to see it. And we are prepared to make any adaptations to the front of the horse box to make it suitable. It's a really valid point that's been raised, and we take it very seriously. Commensurate with that, all of our safety regulations are in line with NCAS and national requirements. I don't want to labour the point too much, just to say that I think it's unfair to suggest that we would be direct competitors to the vast majority of the people the bid are representing, although I respect their points. And of those that remain, I think fair competition is a good thing. And there should be no monopoly in town for businesses that aren't part of the bid. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk, unless my wife...
I just had 2 points that I wanted to add. The first one is that we have registered with Cheltenham Council Food Hygiene, and we're due to have our rating done imminently. We were just waiting, if I'm completely honest, on the verdict of today to then see whether or not we need to change our approach. And I know that the bid do Cheltenham vouchers, and so one of the areas that I wanted to explore was whether or not they can be potentially used, or some form of discount to those that are Cheltenham members. I know you don't call your businesses members, but I don't know what else to refer to them as. And where possible, we use recycled materials. So cold drinks are all in cans, which can be recycled. The cakes will be in recyclable paper packaging. Our coffee beans come in a big reusable tub. So we try to be economical and also as environmentally friendly as possible.
The final point, is that the times we've requested are to suit the year, the business year, and the different events that take place in town. I'm not suggesting that we put the box in situ at 6 o'clock in the morning, at 6:30, and leave at 7, it will be vastly reduced times around that, with our anticipated operating hours at about 5 hours a day before it doesn't make sense to keep it there. Thank you very much for giving us the time to talk to you.
Thanks. If you can press them. Thank okay, are there any questions for the applicant from members?
Got it. Okay, thank you very much. And thank you very much for bringing your case here today. So it seems to me that your key point then in not being a competitor to the businesses that are listed here today that are with or members or customers of Cheltenham Bid is that you sell exclusively takeaway. Is that really a USP?
No, it's not a USP, but it's a barometer of both the scale of our operation and what we're seeking to achieve. We are not, we're not asking for people to sit down. We're not trying to take customers from sitting down in Pret or Starbucks or some of the independents in the bid. We're targeting workers of Cheltenham that are walking past that can't often stand in a queue to get a coffee, that want to take a brew to work, that want to take a brew to get on the bus or walk home. That's what we're looking for. What we want to do is synergise with the local businesses in town and not be seen as a fly in the ointment. We're perfectly keen to work with people. We also intend to sell as a USP unique coffees. So, of course, there'll be the standard coffees that you'll see in town, but we'll also be doing a Greek coffee that's created in the Greek ways. We might do an Italian coffee the following month. So we've got some really inventive specialty coffees that we intend to sell as well. But that is, of course, on top of the normal core offering of coffees. It would be misrepresenting of me to suggest that we won't be selling lattes.
That's great. I'm coming at this through like a needs of the area sort of point of view. And I mean, the list there that's been presented by Cheltenham Bid's quite a long list, but it doesn't include some other businesses in Cheltenham or in Cheltenham town that sell coffee. So I noticed that Scandinavian Coffee Pod's missing. I noticed that Society Cafe is missing as well, which are very, very popular cafes. Did that, I'm thinking of this as needs of an area. This is already quite a saturated market. Did that cross your mind at all when you came up with the box?
Of course, it's cost a fortune. We've spent a lot of money on the box. And so absolutely, we've done our market research. We've done lots of research into coffee selling stats. We've looked at similar towns to Cheltenham in the area. I myself am from Warwickshire. Before I moved here, I've gone back to Nuneaton and I've looked at the town, and it has very similar, slightly less saturation of the coffee market in town. I think my perspective is that competition is fair. There were no objections from the council, as far as I understand, for the Cornish bakery. We've not been able to find any, which is competition to the items that have been listed by the bid. And I would be, I'd be very interested to find out why our coffee business is suddenly past a threshold for approvals to operate in the town, especially when we're a very different operating model to the bakery that's going in next door, because they're inviting people in, and coffee isn't their sole purpose, nor is the vast majority of the companies that put forward by the bid. We're not selling hot food. We intend to sell coffee, cold food, and cakes, all from the local area. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Any further questions? I was just going to clarify. So Cornish Bakery is moving into a fixed premises. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. I think there's a question from the licensing officer as well.
On the plans you've submitted 2 plans, one with the horse box being diagonal and the other, as per the photo that you sent in, being straight. On the actual diagram with the horse box being straight, it actually says that it's only 1.48 metres left room. The council's requirement is a minimum of 1.8 metres. Can I just get clarified on that?
Oh, sorry. So we took it down at like 5:30 in the morning to ensure that we were not going to be obstructing anybody or being in the way. It's actually over the 1.8. I think it's 2.1.
It's, yeah, it's...
So that when we took it down physically and put it in, we were able to see that actually it more than cleared the area that was required, and we sent an update. The documentations that you've got in that appendix are actually not the updated version that we sent through. We sent through with the pictures, the updated measurements. You can't see, but in the photographs you'll see a tape measure on the floor. Obviously you can't see the minute numbers that are on there, but that's where we were able to clarify. And then just in relation to the trip hazard, if you want to see the picture, I can show it.
Jason?
Question from me. Well, it's not really a question, it's just obviously additional information. That location during, whatever, regardless of the decision of the members this evening, that location I think is completely unsuitable during race, particularly busy race meetings, because of the location of the buses that come back into and out of town. I don't think it's a busy, you know, any road onto a high street is potentially a pinch point in health and safety terms when the races are busy. So March and November at the very least. Obviously you have the bus service that comes to and from town to drop customers en masse, particularly March. I do not think the police would want this to be in this particular location. I've got quite a lot of experience in large events and the movement of people. That would not be suitable. If you see how busy it is when races kick out, particularly during March and questionably during November, that is not suitable where there are going to be large crowds of people around. That's just a bit of information. I mean, you can come back on that, but that's just information for the committee.
Thank you. And it's a very fair point. Obviously, that isn't represented, that perspective hasn't been represented at all in the conversations we've had, especially in the discussions with cleared council space. Also, the Flower Man stall is 41 centimetres higher and 30 centimetres wider than ours. And I'd come back with it, and this is, it might sound like it's a flipping question, I promise you that's not my intent. Was the Flower Man operating in March and November? Because if he was, his stall was occupying a far greater space. What is also not very clear on the pictures is that where set forward there's some confusion, some of the back and forth about the placement of the box. There was some confusion about how far back it was towards the bin and the no entry sign. It's actually about 2 metres in advance. I take your point entirely that in crowded times it's more hazardous. I don't agree that it's any added danger if people are aware of it, and we would be prepared to take whatever measures the committee saw fit and the council saw fit to mitigate the risks, whether that is signage, whether that is cordoned off area, moving it. Happy to work with the council in however you see fit.
I don't know the history of the Flower Man being at that location, but I would imagine there's an attraction for you to be there when the races are on, whereas I don't think that attraction is there for the Flower Man in the same way that you are there for those customers. Hopefully, I would imagine he would not be, for obvious reasons.
It's a really fair point.
Yeah.
All I can say is that we will work with the authorities to make sure we mitigate any risks that the authority has.
Yes, I think, though, the Flower Man, looking at the pictures, spread quite a long way beyond where they should have stopped, because they went all the way to the no entry sign. And I travel up and down that pavement quite often, and you usually had to wait for people to pass before you could go down the gap, because they had taken a lot more room than they really should have. So it's not really a good comparison. I'm still unclear, though, with the measurements. You say you measured 2.1. It says in the report that the rule is a minimum of 1.8 on one side, and that it's 1.8 on one side and 1.49 on the other side. Where's this 2.1? Which side was that?
So on the pedestrian side, is just under 2.1 metres, and on the building side, and as you're walking on the side of the road, because of the angle of the road and by bringing the box forward, it sits at about 1.9 metres. Again, happy to show you the pictures of us going down. Yes, it is. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm going through all the documents we've got, and I can't see a revised plan. Do you know when you sent that in?
About a month ago. We've had
4th, I believe it's the 4th of July.
4th of July.
Okay. Are there any more questions? Not seeing any, in which case we'll move to...
May I?
Oh, have you got another question?
Yeah, no,
Yes.
this one's actually for the licensing officers, and I'm not sure if this is a question I can ask, so you can shoot me down if it isn't. But have we had much interest in this pitch before or at the moment?
The flower stall was there for many years. Over the since COVID, they stopped trading. They went from 7 days a week down to just weekends, and then went down to just a few times a year. They obviously surrendered their consent for trading in that area due to lack of trade in there. We haven't had lots of requests for other street traders there. We do have requests for street trading in areas, but when a area is already being used and already has consent, obviously that is a straight response to any queries in that regard.
So just to confirm then that the box is pretty much the only applicant we've had since the Flower Man.
Yes, they are the only applicant for that area.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think it's worth clarifying, though, that it's each application on its own individual merits, and if a plot is vacant, there isn't necessarily a compulsion to fill it. It's
absolutely. I think I was sort of trying to investigate whether we can get diversity in the offering that the street has. That was what I was trying to investigate there or explore.
The only thing I can add as well is that, I mean, the Flower Man being there predates me being at this council, but I would have been, I'm surprised that the council granted that stall in that location with such a narrow gap. If that's what the permission was actually granted by the council, I'm quite surprised that was the case. But what I would also say is I think the issue of awareness of issues of accessibility has risen in the last few years. I think people are more conscious now than they would have been 10, 15 years ago about the issues of people with sight issues, wheelchair access for people with prams and that sort of thing. So I think that there's a bit more of awareness of that now, and this is a busy location in relation to obviously just a normal location along a high street.
Do you want to come back on?
Only if it's okay. Just to, you know, and I'm not trying. You know, obviously I'm going to try and represent our perspective. You'll notice in the pictures, quite fortuitously, at 5:30 in the morning, when we took it down, there are two people walking with about 35 centimetres in between them, each pulling a great big suitcase to their side. There's ample space, and the space that we're asking for on either side is greater than current regulations around people moving through that area. Whilst I take your point entirely, we can only go to the regulations that are in front of us, and the space is in excess of regulations that remains.
There are obviously different restrictions in relation to different pieces of legislation, but that is a benchmark. There is a difference between the gap that might be needed along Regent Street, for example, where the council has been sensitive to the requests of business in terms of the gap that's needed. There is a potentially different approach that would be taken to another location that might be considered more of a pinch point, that might be considered to have a higher footfall. Each particular location, there is a guide there, but obviously each individual location would have certain considerations that would have to be made that might affect that either way, and the government guidance on these things does reflect that. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Richard.
And just to add to that, if I'm looking at the shape of the pavement, it becomes gradually wider as you come down towards the high street, and it's 7.5 metres down at this end. And it's wide because there are bus stops and bins and signs, and so the actual width for pedestrians is limited further up, and clearly the council at some point in the past decided this is a plot because it doesn't narrow the pavement compared with the rest of the pavement. But in actual fact, we've got a very wide pavement there, and we seem to be saying 1.8 metres either side is okay. Why is it that wide if we're going to then restrict it down? I think that any business or licence that goes there should be in line with the bus stops and the signs. That must have been the original intent. Otherwise, we're getting rid of sort of real estate that's there for pedestrians.
I think that's moved in. You're moving us in towards the debate rather than the questions. So I would suggest that we move to the debate at the moment. So before I do that, I'll remind you that it's important that you give due regard to the council's licensing policy, and if you're going to deviate from that policy, you need to give clear reasons for doing so. You need to take into account only material licensing considerations, and the decision that you're going to make needs to be rational, reasonable and proportionate. And if I remind you of where the actual licensing policy considerations are in the agenda pack, you've got environmental credentials, the appearance of the stall or vehicle, public safety, public nuisance and needs of the area. So I'm happy to run through what my thoughts on each of those. I'm not seeing any dissent on that. Right, so in terms of the environmental credentials, they seem to be fine. It would have been useful if we'd have had more information with the application, but what we've heard, I don't think triggers any problems with the environmental credentials. I don't have any problems with the appearance of the stall or the vehicle. That seems to, in terms of appearance, it does in the policy actually say it does about public access, and I think one of the comments there is about the challenges for accessibility around it, especially at busy times such as race week and even potentially busy weekends. Public safety, I think that is something that is a concern, but probably not one that's can't be mitigated. So you're looking at whether you can cover it in a luminous orange thing that stops people walking into it and makes the tow hook incredibly visible. Not sure that there's anything about public nuisance. For me, what's the crux of the matter is the needs of the area. And it's about saying about the goods sold by other established retailers, and what we're trying to compare is not necessarily like for like. So the bid businesses in fixed premises are paying business rates and have a lot more overheads, and I know not all of us will have been here, but we've had those conversations about street trading numerous times before in committee, and the difference between a fixed premises that has to go through one set of frameworks, so the planning permission, all of any other licenses they need, all of that, and pay business rates versus a street trader that has no business rates to pay and is paying for the site, the license fee for the site. And I think in terms, from my point of view, the objection number one from the bid very clearly and eloquently seems to say that is a concern. I think objections number 2 and 3 also try to make that point, but possibly not quite so eloquently. So that's my take on it. I don't know whether any other members wants to comment, either to agree with that, to dissent, or if you're happy.
Thank you, Chairman. Generally agree. I'm not so convinced about the competition idea, because generally I'm in favour of competition, but I think I do have concerns on safety. The mass and location is influencing quite a lot, so I'll leave it at that for now.
Any more for any more?
Well, I'd probably just go on to say I think I agree with you too, and I think I'm going down the needs of the area sort of avenue, and I'm sort of thinking about what does it need, or what do people in Cheltenham need, or pedestrians walking down that patch of the high street, and I think that's where you get into the sort of the competition and other offerings immediately near the proposed application. However, I also agree with Councillor Harman that our competition is a good thing. So there's that. But at the same time, that's why I wanted to ask if there had been any other applications for that area, just to see if there was potentially something else that you could get there. But if that's not the case, then I don't see really pursuing that. On the safety issue, I also agree that it could be difficult with the tow hitch. And I'm not sure what kind of compromise there could be to make it more obvious for people who maybe do have a vision impairment, or people who are in a wheelchair. And we've already discussed today that on a busy day, it's difficult to get down there. So even with the 2 meters or 1.8 meters, it will also be increasingly difficult. And then also I'd like to say that, how do we know that every day you pitch up, it will be the exact same pitch? One day it might be closer to the building, it might be further away the next day. Will it be on an angle as a diagonal one day, or you'll change your mind to be square the next? But that's everything I've got at the moment.
In terms of the pitch, that's something we could condition if we're minded to grant. Sorry, Julie.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say, I sort of agree with what we've been saying. I think it's good to have choice. Personally, I prefer sort of smaller trader to going somewhere like Starbucks, and I think it's good to have the choice. And we have got a lot of coffee shops, but they are very popular. Yeah, it's a safety thing, I think, for me as well. And I could be speaking out of turn, but could the horse box but not be parallel with the road? Would that not? I don't know if that's with licensing, if that would work, but to me, then it's parallel to the road, so there's more space then. That was just a thought, really. Thank you.
I mean, I think we will probably need to adjourn to just come up with whatever decision notice the reasons for the decision. But before I do that, I need to hear from you, Richard, and then I need to give the applicant right of reply.
Yes, I'm with everyone on the choice and competition. I think that's, that is a good thing. Mine are safety concerns. I think that is a busy pavement, and I'm really worried about that tow hitch, even with an A-frame over it, somebody with no vision at all and a white stick. So, it just makes it harder, even if they don't hurt their legs. It's just harder to get about. It's already hard. I quite like the idea of putting it straight, which would leave a lot more space on either side.
So, applicant, final right of reply, and then we'll ask you to leave while we formulate the reasons.
Firstly, thank you all for your points. Whether or not we're successful in our application, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to come and talk to you. I would quite strongly rebuke the point about safety moving through the area. My background is in surveillance, and I've probably spent about 2.5 days watching the area. We're not in the business of wasting money and also causing people to sue us because they've hurt themselves. And the footfall through that area isn't as being suggested. I take the point entirely about race week, and that is something that we would need to look at. Emily has a picture here of the horse box with the A-frame over. I'd request the opportunity to show the committee this picture so you can see it. This is what I would consider to be a particularly basic mitigation, and we'd be prepared to move in further in mitigating the obvious risk that is faced to the public, although it remains inside the tolerance of the space on either side. And as a final point, you know, we're here to work with the powers that be to try and reach a successful outcome. And so, if the outcome is that we turn the box on its side, 90 degrees, to face whichever way, in whichever configuration the committee sees fit, then we would, of course, absolutely be prepared to do that. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll just make sure that every member can see that picture. I know, and then we'll adjourn to come back for the decision notice. Right. Okay.
So like a specials board, I
And just while that's happening, sorry, take the opportunity to carry on my right of reply. In respect to competition, I'd like to reinforce the point. I'd be very interested to see the objections to the coffee shop that's going in next door in fixed premises that was applied for after we applied to go into that spot, to see the committee's perspective on competition there. I don't say that flippantly. I say that with real desire to understand why our box is past the threshold of competition, but a new business that was applied for after we applied is seen to be inside the threshold, especially when off the top of my head I can think of 6 bakeries in Cheltenham, in and around the High Street area. We will absolutely, if our licence is granted, our request is granted, work with everybody to make sure that it is compliant from a health and safety perspective. But the competition thing, I think, is fair. You know, I think fair competition, and the people we're competing against isn't Starbucks. The people we're competing against are the green coffee machine, who aren't there. You know, I don't think it's a fair comparison to suggest that we're taking business en masse from the massive coffee chains that reside on the council high street, excuse me. Thank you. That really is me. Thank you.
Okay. So we're gonna ask you to step out so that we can formulate the decision notice, and then yep.
Just want to let the members know, as per the photograph that's just gone around, that is an A board. Obviously, under objects on the highway, that could be deemed that we may need an application for that unless we condition it. We would also, as an advertising board, maybe have to have a look at possibly conditioning it not to put any advertising on that A board as well, if this application is granted as well, because obviously we would have to have a separate application in regards to that if so.
So yeah, if we can, yeah, if we can adjourn, and we'll draft up a decision notice, or at least the bones of the decision notice. Okay, thank you for your waiting. So the committee made a unanimous decision, which is the 1.5.2, which is to refuse the application because it doesn't comply with the provisions of the street trading policy. The reasons that we've got for this, so we don't dispute the environmental credentials of the premises, the vehicle. Our concerns are public safety in terms of the effect on people with visual impairment, and as an adjunct to that, our requirement under the public sector equality duty. We've got an appearance of a comment on the appearance of the stall and vehicle, which is that it cannot be seen through, unlike the Flower Man, and that again makes it more of a public safety hazard. So the reasons there are the public safety from the tow hook and that being a trip hazard, especially in a busy area. And then we've got the needs of the area, and I'll read out what it says from the policy, which is that the goods complement and do not conflict with the goods sold by other established retailers within the vicinity. And the objection from the bid has obviously, I think on balance of probability, suggests that test has not been met. Because this is a licensing committee and we only license for street trading, we can't take into consideration what would be planning matters such as the use of any fixed premises. So that isn't a material consideration. We also have regard to 5.4 in the report, which is that the application does not comply with the provisions of the adopted street trading policy because the proposed location is situated outside of the permitted locations. And I think we've covered the issues at 5.6 in the report. That will be expanded into a decision notice and provided to you in due course by the officers. What the committee also said is it's not the vehicle that is the concern or the stall, it's the location. Okay? And that's where we're at. Okay? Is that clear for you? Right. Okay. So you'll get a decision notice in writing from the council with that.
Can I suggest that the committee alters? Somebody can direct me to somebody in the council that can tell me why the BIS application, the Cornish Bakeries application is sub-threshold.
So we, the council, the officers from licensing will be able to explain that to you. And if you email licensing, they'll be able to go through that. Jason, do you want to?
In terms of the Cornish Bakery, that's a permanent premises, isn't it? It's a permanent business. This committee will regulate street trading, okay? When someone's operating from a permanent business, they're not subject to any licensing legislation unless they're selling alcohol or providing entertainment, okay? So the licensing team has no remit in controlling that business. If they were selling those pasties after 11 o'clock at night until 5 in the morning, they need a licence from us. If they were selling alcohol, they'd need a licence from us, and in which case we could obviously make certain considerations. The main interaction with that business in terms of the council would be in respect of planning, and they would have to have the relevant use for that business. And I'm assuming that the use side of things is a bit more a bit more generic, should we say, and the same considerations wouldn't be considered in respect of planning as they would be in terms of the street trading application. Hopefully that clears it up a little bit.
I appreciate clearing it up. I'm sure you can appreciate.
So I think we need to draw this to a close because ultimately we've got other items on the agenda. The officers from licensing will be more than happy to help you find appropriate locations. That's part of what they will do. But we need to draw this to a conclusion now. Thank you. Okay. You're doing the next item, aren't you? Do you want to go and have a chat?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want Mr. Khan straight in yet?
No, we've got the Tewkesbury thing.
Right,
Yep.
okay, I'm going to keep that brief.
Yep. So item number 4. Bear with me.
It says agenda item 6 on
Item number 4 is briefing notes, and I think what we're asking committee to do, but I'll pass over to Jason, but effectively Tewkesbury Borough Council has a policy consultation on adopting the common taxi licensing standards for Gloucestershire.
No.
Is it not Gloucestershire?
No. Do you want to just pass it to me and I'll...
Okay, but it's for us to just say if we would like to endorse that as a committee. No?
Just...
Okay.
Thanks, David. It's just really to flag up that Tewkesbury Borough Council are basically consulting on a revision to their taxi policy. It's to flag up that that's the case. I don't necessarily think it's appropriate that the committee endorses or comments on that. I just think it's worth it being aware of what's going on in Tewkesbury with their change of policy. It's fair to say that their standards are being raised. We are hoping very quickly, following a conversation with the portfolio holder, we are very much hoping to bring some changes to our taxi policy to move forward. And obviously it would be quite helpful for us to be working in a way that isn't in complete harmony necessarily with Tewkesbury, because there will be some differences, but that we're conscious of the fact that they've just revised a policy, and when we come to review our policy, it wouldn't be making a lot of sense if we were diverging from that to any kind of material large extent, unless there was some very good reasons for doing that. Just to flag up the sort of thought process there, Tewkesbury are going from what was a there are some harmonisations in terms of some bits and pieces from the joint work across GLOG, and that's where David was mentioning, but to a large extent the biggest changes are in respect of their licensing of vehicles. And as an example, from the 1st of January 2024, a new application for a taxi or a private hire vehicle will be refused if it is more than 5 years from date of registration. That's our current requirement. That's what we currently require. That wasn't what Tewkesbury used to require. They're also saying it must be Euro 6, ultra low emission vehicle or electric vehicle. So they are raising the bar in terms of what they will accept on a new application, and they are also saying that renewal applications will be bound by the same constraints after 2020 from the 31st of December 2025. So there's a raising of the bar there in terms of what they'll accept on vehicle applications, and basically an application to renew a vehicle will be refused from the 1st of January 2026 if it's not Euro 6 or better in terms of emissions. That is the biggest difference. The other final point to make is that there is an ambition for them to be going ultra low emission or electric for all of their fleet from 2030 in terms of new applications, and that their renewal of vehicle applications will be bound by the same criteria from 2033. That's an ambition. So that's provisional at the moment, and that's just obviously something that's worth thinking about when it comes to the work on our policy. I mean, I'm quite happy to answer any questions, but I would say that it's not necessary for us to actually necessarily endorse it. It's just, and by all means, if members do want to have a look at it and want to feedback, then obviously make your comments back through the team, and we can highlight that with Tewkesbury. It's anything that any thoughts from members about harmonising and working together and kind of doing these things with some notion of what's going on in another part of the county, all well and good.
Sorry, we can feedback on it, but where's it available?
I can send you the link. We can share the link, yeah. Sorry.
It's hopefully we can share that to all of the licensing committee. Yeah. It's on Tewkesbury, I would imagine it's on Tewkesbury Borough Council's website. But I certainly think the moving towards similar or common standards in a lot of those things and closer working is a positive thing to be welcomed. Do we need an adjournment for you to nip out? Okay, let me read the exempt declaration and then we'll take a couple of minutes. So agenda item 5 is that we move into exempt session, and I've got to read this in full. So that in accordance with section 100A brackets 4, Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the remaining agenda items as it is likely that in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of proceedings, if members of the public are present, there will be disclosed to them exempt information as defined in paragraph 1 and 2, part 1, schedule 12A, Local Government Act 1972, namely, paragraph 1, information relating to any individual, paragraph 2, information which is likely to reveal the identity of an individual. So can I have just a show of hands that we move into exempt session, please? Okay, so for anyone watching on the webcast, that's the end of the public business of the committee. Thank you very much for watching. And we're now going to go in exempt session. And